If you'd like, you can go ahead and open your Bibles up to Matthew chapter 9. Matthew chapter 9. So, most recently, Jesus has been spending some time with his apostles. And what's he been trying to do? He's done some public teaching, and then we had several accounts where he was just with them. What was going on with that in that time? Trying to build their faith. And they had some big faith opportunities there. They had the storm on the sea. Then they had Legion, the two demon-possessed guys in Gergasa. And then they cross back over and they get to the other side, and they've got a dead person. And Jesus raises the dead. So there have been a number of events here. Now, Jesus' popularity is growing as well, and the crowds are multiplying. And so we've seen some miracles like the woman with the issue, the flow of blood. We saw that account. Of course, Jairus' daughter being raised. Then we had 2 blind men that were healed, at which he told, don't tell anybody. And what did they do? They told people. Then there was the demon-possessed mute man whom he healed. And so there's a number of miracles taking place. And I think these are just samplings. That brings us down to verse 35 in Matthew chapter 9, where it says, Jesus went about the cities and the villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. So this is another tour in the Galilee area. We don't know how many of these that he made during this time, but he's making these circuits where he's going to these different synagogues and teaching, and he's also performing miracles. And every time that he does something like this, the crowds are just growing and growing and growing. So you notice in verse 36, when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were wearied and scattered like sheep having no shepherd. I found this picture, and that's what I envision a lot of what Jesus' days looked like. Looking over masses of people that would come to him. And each of these people have a need. The need may be physical. They may be there because they need healing. But all of them have a spiritual need. And Jesus is able to look into the heart of each and every one of them. It's bewildering to me when I'm in a large city or at an event where there's a large crowd, for me to stop and consider that every one of these people have a soul. Every one of these people are headed one of 2 places. I have a very limited perspective and understanding that. I can barely comprehend my own eternal destiny and the eternal destiny of my family, much less beyond that. To be able to look over thousands of people, and every face that you look into, see their deep needs, see their lost conditions, see the problems that they have, the weight of that would be tremendous. Jesus, I believe, had that ability. And as he looks over the crowds, he's moved with compassion because they were weary and scattered like sheep having no shepherd. I think this is their spiritual condition more than their physical condition, although it may be their physical condition as well. But the reason I say it's their spiritual condition, because look at what he says in verse 37. He said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Look how many souls need to be reached. And look at how few people there are trying to take the truth to them. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send forth laborers out into his harvest. That's what we need, Jesus says. And guess what? The apostles are about to get some training in. That very thing. And so now he's been building their faith. They've heard his teaching. They've been following him because of his teaching. He's built their faith. Now he's about to train them for the work of going out and preaching the gospel and carrying this message on past when he's going to be here. He's going to leave, but they will continue on. And so the training process is about to become more intense for them, which we'll see in the next lesson.
I do think right here it's interesting. You see there's a need here. You know, there's a need of more laborers because of the opportunities. What's Jesus encouraging the people to do when there's a need? Verse 38.
Pray.
Yeah, so I think, here's a time where there's a need. Jesus is encouraging people to pray to the Father. I think that's something that stands out to me.
Anything through this section?
This is the second time, at least his inner circle has heard this exaltation as far as, pray with the Father.
Yeah.
Before he said the same thing.
Right. That's right.
Basically, so it's like he's, trying to
Yeah.
get this pounded in that, the need for them moving forward is going to be great.
Yes. Yes.
And they're not exempt from this. I think we're about to find that out.
Yes.
But, so they're praying for it, but
Right.
I don't want that to be on this.
Right. Hope somebody does something. Yeah, that's a very good point.
What kind of laborers were needed? They were like sheep without a shepherd. They needed shepherd.
Yeah.
Guides.
Yes. Yeah. Do you view your role that way? I understand these were specially sent out apostles, but actually what he's saying to them is pray for more. Pray for more. And have we developed that mentality that when we see a crowd, when we see people, we think, they need the truth. And we need to be laborers in presenting that truth. I think that's a challenge for us to see to view as Jesus viewed people.
I like that Timmy brought up the guidance there. There were sheep without a shepherd that needed guidance. Maybe this is a stretch here, but the language there reminds me of 1 Kings 22 when Ahab wants to go take Ramoth Gilead from Syria. And Micaiah tries to warn him not to. And he says, what's going to happen? And he said, I saw Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let each return to his home in peace. The problem was Ahab was not following what the Lord had told him to do. That was going to be the result of it. They needed the Lord's guidance. And here's people that look like sheep without a shepherd that need the Lord's guidance. And so I'm glad Timmy brought that up. Maybe there's a connection there, but maybe the idea is similar.
All right, flip over to Mark chapter 6. In Mark chapter 6, we have an account here, and it seems to fit in at this point. Maybe this is not right, so it can't be exact where everything fits in, but it seems that maybe this fits in here. This seems to be Jesus' last trip to his hometown of Nazareth, at least the last one that's recorded for us, I believe. So in Mark chapter 6, in verse 1, he went out from there and came to his own country, and his disciples followed him. Now, he's been to Nazareth before. After he began his earthly ministry, it was one of the first places that he went. How was he received? At first, they were like, whoa. And then he made a point. Does anybody remember the point that he made? What's that? Yes, and they marveled at such words, but then he said something else, and this was, that they're going to reject him. Well, he makes the point in the past that God's people didn't receive God's prophets, that God's prophets ended up going to foreigners because they would hear, and that's when they get upset with him. And what do they try to do? They try to kill him. And so he goes back, which is pretty brave, and his disciples are with him. And it says, when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in their synagogues, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this which is given him? Such mighty works are performed by his hands. Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended. Okay, what was it about his teaching that offended them? Anything? What did they say about his teaching and his works? They marveled at that. What was it that was offensive? His status. This is the carpenter's son. This can't be some great rabbi. This can't be the Messiah. We know his brothers and sisters. And so Jesus said to them in verse 4, a prophet is not without honor except where? His own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house. And by the way, when he says in his own house, we're going to find out a little bit later, how do his brothers, they're mentioned here, how do his brothers feel about him? They don't believe him. They don't believe him. Can you imagine? Here is the Messiah, the Christ, and the place where he grew up, the house that he grew up in, they're the very ones that don't have any confidence in him. in this, even though they marvel at his teaching. But they're offended by the fact that this couldn't be. Our big brother couldn't be the Messiah. You know, Joseph's son couldn't be the Messiah. And so verse 5 says, he could do no mighty works there except that he laid hands on a few sick people and healed them. I have a question here because we made the point, I believe, in the last class, maybe it was a class before that, that Jesus' power was not limited based upon someone's faith. In other words, he healed people that didn't have any faith. But now there were times where he said that a person's healing was conditional upon their faith. Let it be to you as you believe or as you said. But here it says he could do no mighty works. Do you think that their unbelief handicapped Jesus in some way?
No, I think it wouldn't be helpful for the kingdom for him to use all that there. So he did.
Okay.
So just like with Legion, he said, "You can't follow me. Go back."
Yes.
Here, he helped some that it would be helpful for them to be helped, but he didn't waste his time.
Good point. Don?
Jealousy. They're jealous of him.
Yeah. Yeah. What were you going to say, Timmy?
I said their unbelief handicapped them.
Like
Yes.
what you said earlier, it didn't some people, but I believe it.
That's exactly right. So I think about it. Most of his mighty works were when people came to him wanting to be healed. Well, if they don't believe who he is, I don't think they're going to come to him. And so he could do no mighty works there because nobody was coming to him. They were offended by him and nobody was coming to him. I think that's the idea. And as you said, it would be a waste of time because they're already set. Their prejudice against him has already inhibited them from being able to see the truth. Now, there were some. He healed a few sick people, but he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about the villages in a circuit teaching. And so he moves on. How sad. First of all, going back to the prophecy in Isaiah, that this area, the land of Naphtali and Zebulun, that this land would see a great light. The very town that the light grew up in is darkened. Darkened hearts. And how sad that is. So a prophet has no honor, has honor except in his own country. That's the place that he doesn't have honor.
Wasteland, and that was written, but then, I mean, the appearance would be this area has no hope.
Yeah,
And yet the prophet says, no hope is coming.
that's right. That's right.
Wouldn't that be seeing they do not see, hearing they do not hear?
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
And hope I'm not taking this longer, but the marveling because of their unbelief is interesting to me. That type of comment.
No.
Because we see other instances where Jesus marvels at things. Most of the time it seems to be because of people's faith. It's like, wow, I've not found such a faith in all of Israel or things like that. And here he's marveling because of their unbelief. It's just interesting to me that this is someone who from the very beginning made man, knows what man is like. And sometimes they might be like, well, he's impressed at people's faith because he knows that people really struggle with that. But here, he's impressed with their unbelief. And it's like, well, that must have been pretty bad then, for them to, just been pretty maybe depressingly bad that they have all these signs are coming out like, this is the source of the light. We're originated. And they can see it.
Yeah. It's almost like the people who you think would have the easiest time believing are the ones who don't, and the ones who would have the hardest time are the ones who do. And that's kind of maybe why the marveling goes either way.
The fact that they believed everything he said and marveled at it, but it was like, but because of who he is,
Yeah,
I don't want no part of that.
right.
Insane.
Yep, that's right. Anything else?
Might be a good just note for us. Like there might be things that we don't want to hear because of who's saying it, but maybe we should focus on that as much as what's being said.
Yep.
And see if what we're hearing is truth or not true for that matter. Then focus on who's saying it.
Well, I think this happens in most homes. Your kids grow up and they get to a certain stage where they will almost listen to anybody else besides you. Why is that? I think that's right. And that's a sign of immaturity because as Bill Cosby said, they get out of the house and they're amazed at how much their parents learned in the 3 years that they were away or whatever, and so, but it's a sign of immaturity. They haven't yet matured to see what is right before them. They grew up with this and they don't see the value in it. And I think that that's what you see in Nazareth as well. You see immaturity here. They can't see beyond the fact of, well, we know his family. And this is common. And so I think that's part of it. I think that's related in some way. All right. I would love to know the rest of that story. Mary is never, Mary talks about, it talks about Mary, she treasured these things in her heart. It never seems, we've already seen her in Cana with water to wine. She seemed to have confidence there that Jesus could do something. Joseph, we haven't seen him in the picture since he was 12 years old, so we don't know what happened to Joseph on this. And the brothers and the sisters, we're not really told anything about them other than they don't believe at this point. Later, the brothers will. I don't think the sisters are mentioned again, so we don't know. But so we see that. So I would love to know what has been told, to the siblings. Maybe it's been told and they're still like, yeah, that's mom and dad's favorite. But I don't know how they thought about that. But they weren't confident of it at this point, at least. But Mary seems to, nothing's ever indicated that Mary, really doubted or had trouble. That I don't know that either. Yeah.
But she's seen a lot, early on,
Yes.
even before his birth, to know that
Right.
this one's special.
Yep. That's right. Anything else? All right, let's go over to Matthew chapter 10, and we'll stay in Matthew chapter 10 for a little while here. Probably the rest of the lesson this evening. You want to take whatever you'd like to take there?
Sure. So we left off with Matthew 9:38. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. So there is a need there. The crowds are growing, and more laborers are needed. I want to read just one verse in Mark 6. You don't have to turn there, but Mark 6:7, and he called the 12 to himself and began to send them out 2 by 2. And so that gives us a little bit more detail. We're picking up back in Matthew 10, verse 1. And when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. So we get the idea here that they have prayed, and it seems that these 12 are kind of maybe the answer to that prayer. They're going to be the laborers. Now, this is not the anointing of the 12. We've already seen that when we discussed that in Luke 6. But it seems it's just kind of a reminder of who these 12 are. And I think it's interesting that Mark tells us they're sent out 2 by 2. And I think when you look at the list here, you kind of get them in order of 2. Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, James and Lebbaeus. It seems like they were sent out in pairings as they went out. Now, verse 1 is a very important moment in the lives of these men and in the kingdom. That he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. This is a very important moment for what they will do here, what they will do in this moment where they're sent out among all the children of Israel. But I also think it's a very important moment for what they're going to do in the future. Because we know there's going to come a time where Jesus is going to ascend to heaven. And who are the people that he gives his authority to, that he entrusts their authority to? The apostles, these 12. And so I wonder if this is the same power. Maybe Lonnie has a good answer or you guys can chime in. But this may very well be the moment they receive that power that carries over with them into the kingdom. I know in Acts 1, the Spirit's going to descend upon them. And so maybe they have it for this commission, they lose it and they get it back. But even if that's the case, this is sort of a training moment for them to see how it is they're supposed to use that power and what they're supposed to do with it as they go out. So it's a very important moment, and it's going to be a great learning moment as we look at this commission and what the goal is they're supposed to do. Anything to add through verse 1-4.
Let me just emphasize again, that, because this will come up later, and I think you did emphasize this, but they have power over unclean spirits. Okay? Jesus gave them the power over unclean spirits. Keep that in your mind, because that will come up later. And they're going to wonder, well, what's the problem here? And the problem is with them, not with what Jesus entrusted them with.
All right, verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent out and commanded them, saying, do not go into the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out the demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Provide neither gold nor silver, nor copper in your money belts, nor bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staffs, for a worker is worthy of his food. So Jesus has given them this power. And for what reason did he give them the power? Yeah. Yeah, to save the lost sheep of Israel, the house of Israel. But we call this a limited commission. I think it's limited in the sense that it's limited in its location, it's limited in its time. This is not going to be when Jesus sends and they're to go out for good. But this is kind of to help Jesus spread this ministry, right? The crowds, the multitudes are growing, so as to help him spread this ministry. Now, where are they instructed not to go? Yeah, to the Gentile Samaritans. So we just mentioned they are instructed to go to the lost children of Israel. So why do you think this is? They're just to focus on the lost children of Israel at this moment.
It's not time to reach the Samaritans or the Gentiles.
I think that's right. Anything else? I don't know if I have the best answer to that either, but I think it's not time for the Gentiles yet. There's still things that need to be taught to the children of Israel. I also think maybe that God has promised things to Israel that need to be fulfilled, and this is God's people, so he's going to focus on them first.
So I know, first of all, just think about where, as you said, the promises. They've all been to Abraham's descendants. And so it would be kind of odd if there's not, I mean, it just seems like that would be the natural thing, is you would go to them first and deal with them first. So that makes sense, I think, just in the flow of the Bible story. But Paul, even when he would travel around, and Paul was an apostle to who? The Gentiles. But almost everywhere Paul went, where did he go first? Yes. And on a number of occasions, when the Jews rejected him in the synagogue, he would say, okay, you have shown yourself unworthy. Now I will go to the Gentiles. And I really do believe that that was what God wanted him to do. Even though he was an apostle to the Gentiles, he always went to the Jews first. They were the heirs of the promise in many ways. I mean, as far as the primary, or not primary, I'm looking for the right word here, and I'm not finding it. But it was to the house of Israel that these promises were initially made. It makes sense that he would go to them first to receive the blessings of these promises. When they rejected them, then he moved on to others. It's not that those promises weren't for all nations, because they were. But Abraham's descendants, physical descendants, did have a special role in that coming about, and it seems that God chose to go to them first. And here, Jesus is limiting his work to that. And so, were there ever exceptions made to this? To this idea of Jesus only working with the Jews? Yeah, the Samaritan woman is already one example.
Amanda mentioned centurion.
The centurion, yes. You think of any others? We haven't got to this one yet, but there's all right, the widow in Nain. I don't know. She may have been, Nain was an Israelite town. But I think, yes, the Syrophoenician widow that had the demon-possessed daughter that he cried out. And remember there he makes the point, he says, no, I've not come to give the children's bread to the dogs. And she said, but even the dogs get the crumbs. And Jesus said, I've not seen such faith in Israel. and heals. All right, so I want you to think about when the children of Israel came into the land of Canaan, what did God say to do to all the Canaanites? Drive them out, destroy them. Were there any exceptions made to that? Rahab and her family.
Was there an exception like in the law that if a sojourner was circumcised and joined himself to a family in Israel?
I'm not certain about all of that, but I think you may be onto something there as well. The Gibeonites were another group. So those are two. What was it about those that were exceptional? They tricked them. That's right. Why did they trick them, though? They had faith. They had faith. What was about with the Syrophoenician woman or the centurion or the Samaritan, the woman at the well? What did they exhibit? They exhibited a faith. So I just make this point. I've made this point several times. How does God feel about faith? He has a soft spot in his heart for people who will put their trust in him and trust their whole life to him, because that's what these people were doing. And so even when there was a focus on driving out the Canaanites or a focus on we're only going to the children of Israel right now, when one showed great faith, he was still accepting of that, which I don't know. That's impressive to me because I want to be acceptable to the Lord, and he's told me what is acceptable to him, great faith. And if he was willing to make exceptions in those cases because of great faith, then it gives me greater confidence that if I have great faith, I will be acceptable to him as well. Anyway, that was a long way of saying that, but
Good point. So verse 8, Jesus says,
yeah, what were you going to say? I'm sorry. Yes. That's a good way of saying that.
well said. So Jesus has called the 12 together, and in verse 8, he's given them these specific powers from him. And what are they supposed to do with it? At the end of the verse, freely you have received, freely give. So what are they supposed to do with it? Well, use it. That's the idea of why he's given it to them. And then verse 7 tells us why. As you go preach, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So this is the reason they were supposed to use these signs. Does this not look a lot like what Jesus has done so far? He's come preaching, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He's had this exact same message along the way. And then he commits these signs and these miracles purely as validation, as confirmation to say the things that I'm saying are true. And so this is the same thing he's entrusted the 12 with at this moment, is go and preach and use these signs as confirmation so the people can truly believe and truly see that the power you have is from God, so they can validate the things you have said are true. And so that's what's going on there with the signs. And so Jesus wants his apostles to use his powers to point people to him. 9 and 10 are interesting verses that they are to provide neither gold or silver or copper in their money belts, nor a bag for their journey, nor tunics, nor sandals, nor staffs, for a worker is worthy of his food. So what do you think is going on in verses 9 and 10? Does Jesus not want them to bring anything along the trip with them?
It might be that the people they're talking to are not the ones being tested in some manner.
Yeah, I think that's right. Almost a test of their faith, in a sense. So Mark's account versus Matthew's account kind of differ a little bit. Mark's account seems to say I think it's a staff, to bring a staff, whereas Matthew says nor a staff. But that word there in the New King James Version, the very first word of verse 9 is provide. Does anybody have a different word there? In verse 9, the very first one. Acquire, yeah. So I think that's the idea there, is that they are not to go and acquire extra. I know the LSB and the ESV would have it acquire. So I think it's not that they're not supposed to bring these things. They're just supposed to bring kind of a normal amount for the trip, and they're not to worry about acquiring all these provisions along the way.
Something that might help with that.
Yeah.
At the end of verse 8, where it talks about, yours says you receive freely give, something like that. So ESV translates it, you receive without paying, give without paying. And then it goes into don't acquire things.
Right. So the ESV might have it more of a natural transition.
Maybe, but I just think that might help with the idea there of saying maybe they're just not, like you said, they're not trying to get extra things.
Right.
Just what you have will be enough.
Right. And I think that's the idea. And so what are some reasons Jesus might be telling the 12 to do this, to behave this way?
Well, these are the 12 that we've heard the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, do not worry, because God takes care of the birds and the lilies, and he'll take care of you. And he wants them to go and preach that the kingdom of heaven is at hand without any ties to maybe materialism. And they depend on Jesus, their faith.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. He wants them to have this faith. So I think maybe he doesn't want them to waste the time he's given them on worrying about these things, but yet to have faith that God, in God's providence, that he will provide for them. And has there been any faith-building moments? Not just the Sermon on the Mount. Has there been any faith-building moments leading up to this? Yeah, a whole series of them. Kind of the last couple of classes we talked about, these would have built their faith along the way. And so these men should have that in their minds as well as his teachings to trust, to have faith in this moment.
You know, go ahead.
Is it also, could it be that it's easier to travel to if they don't have a horse?
Sure.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, that's right. For the rest of their lives, these men are going to be going places they've never been before, without any assurance that anybody's going to receive them, without knowing what's available there, really just going, trusting that the Lord will provide as they go. That's a big ask. That's a big ask. So how do you get to the point where you have that type of confidence? I think what Jesus is doing here, this is the limited commission. You were talking about limited in duration. You're going out for a short period of time. And I almost think of it as, here's a person that's going to have to survive out in the wilderness. Well, if you're building up to that, what you do is you go out for a three-day trip, and without bringing any essentials with you, and you learn to survive off the land for 3 days. You don't go out there for the rest of your life. You start off with a smaller trip and learn how to do this. And I think what Jesus is doing is he's building their faith by sending them out with no more than what they have, and they just have to go out. Can you imagine taking a trip for, let's say it's 2 weeks? I have no idea what the length, the duration is here, but let's say it's 2 weeks. And I say, just as you are right now, whatever you have in your car, you head out and that's it. Don't go home. Don't pack anything else. Just go as you are. How would you? Some of you ladies would be fine because I know what you have in your cars and your purses, so you would be fine. But it would be like, well, how are we going to do this? And then what if you went out for 2 weeks and everything worked out just fine? You always had enough, not more than you needed, but enough. And then I said, all right, now I want you to go for 2 months. Oh, well, okay. In other words, they're learning this. For the rest of their lives, they're going to have to depend upon the Lord providing for them. Now, when they're sent out on the Great Commission, Jesus is going to make the point. Take with you what you think you're going to need. But the lesson had already been ingrained. The Lord's going to take care of you. He'll provide for you. And so I think that that limited commission is a training, a testing of, will they learn to depend upon the Lord in this?
This is not the purpose of why I said it all, but it may have been good for Judas Iscariot to hear this too. He might have tried to get something out of the power. I don't know.
It's possible to prevent it from being a stumbling block to some people. Well, they're doing this for the money.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that could be. It would be very hard to make that accusation when somebody shows up with just what they have on.
And these are men at the end of the day too. So the temptation might always lock the door for them. So it may be good for them to hear that as well. Any more thoughts before we move on? All right, verse 11. Now, whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and stay there till you go out. And when you go into a household, greet it. If the household is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And whoever will not receive you, nor hear your words when you depart from that house or city, shake off the dust from your feet. Assuredly, I say to you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So you see in verses 11 through 15, you have this idea of houses being worthy and being unworthy. And I think the idea there is for the apostles to recognize that and kind of properly disperse their efforts to the people who will be willing and receptive to receive this message they have for them. I think that's what's going on with the idea of houses being worthy and unworthy. Verse 13, if this is the case, let the peace they can offer come upon them. If the house is worthy, give them this peace that you can offer. Give them the message. Provide these miracles for them. Show them that these things are so. But if it's not worthy, don't, right? Do the opposite. Let your peace return to you. In verse 13, let your peace return to you. Verse 14, and whoever will not receive you, nor hear your words, when you depart from that house or city, shake off the dust from your feet. So here's people who don't receive the word. And so what are the apostles supposed to do when they don't receive it? Yeah, they're supposed to shake off the dust from their feet. I think the idea there is to move on, right? To keep moving. Don't take any part of that with you, right? Don't expend your efforts in this area because they're not receiving it. And so it's very similar to a verse we read in Matthew 7. Don't cast your pearls among the swine. I think you have that same idea there. But move on to the next. Don't take any part of this with you and go somewhere where your efforts will be well expended.
You can later in Acts, you see the apostles do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lydia asked them to stay with her, and they stay.
There's
Yeah.
other times they
They move on. That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I wonder if is this supposed to be like an act of, like maybe a proclamation of condemnation somehow? I mean, like this is a different circumstance because I mean, obviously before it's like you might go into a house or to a town, and there are some that will accept you. The worthy will accept you, and others that are not worthy. And this is like if no one will accept you, then you do this, right? And so it's not. I mean, and then when he follows up in the next verse, I just wonder if this is maybe something a little bit more than just saying like, well, we're just not going to waste our efforts here. I wonder if this is maybe meant to be some type of sign of more of like proclamation of judgment. So.
I do think that, yeah. So the shaking off the dust is basically, I don't want any part of this place anymore. I don't even want any of the dust of the land of this place still on me. I think that's part. I think that's a similar idea. Pilate is saying, I'm free of this. And so I think that is part of it. So going back to this as a training exercise here in many ways. Are they to depend upon people's hospitality? Yes, they are to depend upon people's hospitality. So if you are depending upon somebody's hospitality, are you going to be likely to want to try to please them? Yes, they're feeding you every night. Yes. And what does Jesus say about that? Is your motive to please them? Your motive is to preach that the kingdom is at hand. Now, if they receive that, then great, stay with them. But if they reject it, you don't change the message. You move on. Well, where am I going to stay? Don't worry about that. You move on. And so I think that that's part of it too, that there's this idea that, yes, you will be taken care of. Wherever you go, there will be those that take care of you, but you don't coddle them. You don't try to preach whatever they want to hear just so that they'll continue to provide for you. Don't be afraid to move on that and recognize that if they do reject you, judgment's coming up on them. And this goes back to what Austin was saying, and you don't want to be caught up in that judgment. Get the dust off and move on. But that's a proclamation to them too of saying, hey, it's not going to be good for you, and I can't stay here and be part of this, and moving on. So I think that all of that is kind of tied up in this, and this would be what they were to do going forward. That's part of the reason how the gospel spreads, because they would be driven from one town, or they would leave one town and go to another town and continue in that way. And so the kingdom spread because of this mentality of we're not here to tickle ears and make people, happy with what we're saying. They either receive it or they don't, and we keep looking for those who are willing to receive it. Yes. Yeah, that's right.
I'd like to say something about that. That verse 6 and 7, go straight to the lost sheep of the house of Israel and proclaim the kingdom of heaven is hand. Well, since they are Jews, they should have been looking for this. Here's the deal: the king has arrived.
That's right.
That's what the kingdom is.
Yes,
That's the kingdom of heaven.
that's right. Yep, that's right. I'm glad you pointed this out because I meant to say something about this. I do want you to notice John the Baptist came preaching, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven. Jesus came preaching, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The apostles are sent out at this point saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Their message is going to change a little bit after the day of Pentecost. Do you know how it's going to change? The kingdom of heaven is at hand means it's near. It's very close. After the day of Pentecost, what's the message? Kingdom has come. Now you can be part of it. This is still preparatory, but the time will come where there's no more preparation. It's here.
In verse 15, think about people who have this opportunity. Here's the kingdom of heaven in his hand. What's going to happen if they reject it? Well, it's going to be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment, never that city. So real quick, I want to think about something while we're here. So the 12 were sent out to seek the lost sheep of the children of Israel. Is there a sense in today where we're supposed to go out and seek lost sheep for the Lord's kingdom? I think so. I think that's what the text will call us to do, is to go out to seek out lost people. So is there some practical application that we could draw for ourselves when talking to other people and trying to grow the Lord's kingdom from the way that the 12 are supposed to interact with people who do and don't receive the message here? I think so. I think there's some things that we can learn. And so when we're talking to people, I think if it's clear that they're rejecting and that we're not making any progress and we're going over that over and over again, I think there may be a time we need to say, okay, it's time to move on, time to focus our efforts in other places, kind of like Jesus was telling the 12 to do here. I think, again, this was specific directions for the 12 in this moment, but I think there are some practical applications we can draw for ourselves when talking to other people in the world around us.
Would you ever shake off the dust and tell somebody it's going to be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah than for them? I don't know. I think and that's what I wanted to get at.
I don't know if you'd say it like that, but there might be a time you have to say, I've done what I can and have to move on.
Yeah. I think the temptations that the apostles are facing here, that Jesus is trying to get them to work through, are the same temptations that we face. We want people to like us. We want to stay friends with people. If preachers, if they're being supported by brethren, they want to make those brethren happy, and they don't want to preach things that would cause them to be at odds with the people. And so those temptations are all still there. And I think that what Jesus is saying to the apostles would apply to us as well. So you're dealing with someone and you are talking to them about the kingdom, about Jesus being king, about what that means, about allegiance to him, about repentance for their sins, and those type of things, and they won't receive it. Should you continue to spend countless hours trying to persuade them if they are not interested? No, you shouldn't. I got a second point of that, but go ahead, Raymond.
When Jesus Christ knew, when he told somebody over and over 2 or 3 times the same thing, and they still didn't understand it, they wasn't having trouble understanding it, they was having trouble believing it.
Yeah.
So that's why he get aggravated with them, because he done told them so many times and they didn't want to hear it.
Right. So when somebody rejects the truth, as Amanda said, there are times to move on. There's times to move on. I think with that, you probably need to let them know what the consequences of them rejecting the truth is as well. And I think you can do that in a polite way. I don't think it has to be, it's going to be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah than for you. I don't think you have to say that. But I think you can say, this is the only way. This is the only way. And eternity is long. And I mean, you can get the point across to them. Their soul is at stake here, and you believe their soul is lost in that. Are you ever afraid to tell somebody that their soul is lost? Sure we are. And the apostles would be too. So again, this is training. This is saying, look, this is the task that you have. And I believe we have that task too. That doesn't mean we can't be tactful, but we still have that task. Yes.
But I was going to say, Jesus gave up on his brothers and sisters.
I don't see him spending a lot of time with them. I think that they come back around. And as far as when you talk about giving up on somebody, I don't know that God gives up on us until he takes away our last breath. But at the same time, he didn't tell his apostles to continue to center attention on people who are rejecting either. So I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I really don't. But I don't know. His brothers do come back around, but we don't see him. I don't see him spending a lot of time with them. Maybe he did, and it's just not recorded. Maybe somebody did. That's right. All right, we're out of time. We'll pick up there next time, and we'll finish up the material for this quarter in the next class, and then we'll have a review, and then we'll be ready to start the new material next month.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.